What we're doing now is a somewhat brief question and answer session at the end of the day. Questions will be taken by Father Gruner and Chris Ferrara. Those who do want to ask a question, you can form a line next to Trevor here. And again, please, questions only, a specific question related to the Fatima message. So we'll start with our first questions now. Thank you.
Bishop Thomas Msusa from Malawi, that's in Africa. I would like to ask the first speaker, talked about the secret and about the wars which are looming. But I want to talk about Africa because I didn't hear anything about Africa, about Malawi. In Malawi, yes, the third secret is there. But for us, people are dying. The war is there. Disease, HIV. 68,000 people die every year about Malawi. But Africa, 1994, Rwanda was in turmoil. 800,000 people died. 800,000 people died. And just recently, the constitution in Kenya has put abortion to be allowed in the whole of Kenya. The Catholic bishops, together with the Council of Churches, are against that. They are fighting against that. But there it is. My question is, part of the secret, the third secret, does it have anything to do with Africa? Thank you.
I think I can answer. Thank you. You can go next. That's a surprising question and an interesting one because I mentioned the biography of Pius XII before history, and I quoted from pages 52 and 53, and I also said that in those passages there are other interesting things, and one of the things that Pius XII said was that it would be the third world that would save the church, referring to Africa. So that there would be a crisis, and out of Africa would come the means of saving the church, or part of the means. So there'd be perhaps a restoration of the church that would have something to do with Africa. And that was actually part of his prophetic remarks. So maybe in that respect, the third secret makes reference to the churches in the so-called third world.
I would like to point out that Our Lady promised us peace. Of course, the biggest war that's been going on since at least 1972, and in fact, since before then, but abortion was legalized, first of all, in Russia. So when Our Lady says that Russia would spread her errors, of course, we see many of these errors in the whole world, including and especially the United States, as well as Canada. Of course, the Americans and Canadians might think that this is not true, but the fact is, Our Lady is not being for this nation, against that nation, but she is rather talking about the errors, as St. Thomas tells us, that the first fruit of error is injustice. And so when we have the errors of, first of all, denying God the place he deserves and which he owns by right of being God in the public domain, by excluding God, one of the first consequences is that if God is not in charge of laws of nations, then of course might makes right. The strength of the stronger, the French have an expression, la force de plus fort est le droit. I forget how it's, the right of the stronger one is right. And so obviously babies are not stronger than people who are older than them, so now it's a right to kill your baby because they're not strong enough, because there's no God-given rights, because God is excluded. And and we don't have the peace Our Lady promised us. So what happened in Rwanda, what's happening in Afghanistan, what's happening in Iran and in Palestine and so forth, obviously we don't have peace. And all this, Our Lady says, will stop. That the promise Our Lady promises that the whole world, not just Russia, not just the United States, not just Europe, not just one place, the whole world will have peace, but only when the request for the consecration is fulfilled. And so it takes a little bit of courage and a little bit of faith to ask for that. And unfortunately, as Bishop of Fatima said, that the faith is diminishing in Europe. He said it's worse that, he said that in his opinion, I disagree with him in part, but he said the third secret does not talk about missiles, but it talks about the loss of faith. And he talks about, and of course, which is implied by, and the Bishop of Fatima at that time had asked Sister Lucy what it refers to. So referring to what Mr. Ferrara just said here, that the faith of the church is stronger in Africa. St. James tells us, for example, that the faith of the poor is stronger as a matter of divine inspiration in his letter, St. James. And so it could well be that it's, first of all, we need a renewal of faith. And as long as people are saying, well, we don't have to believe in Fatima, we don't have to pay attention to the prophetic message of Fatima, then of course they're going to compromise and do whatever it takes to do in order to have peace for today, to get along with their people, instead of saying the rights of God come first. It could well be that the people of Africa will finally be the ones that can, and the bishops of Africa are the ones that will persuade the Pope to finally do his duty to consecrate Russia, in which case then Africa and the whole world will benefit. And I think that's maybe where it comes from. Thank you.
Is there an issue of obedience by the faithful to the Cardinal Sodano Bertone opinion on the third part of the Fatima secret?
The answer simply is no by the Vatican's own admission. Cardinal Ratzinger made it clear that the interpretation that Cardinal Sodano had imposed and that Cardinal Bertone is carrying forward is only an attempt at an interpretation, is not binding on the faithful, and doesn't preclude the faithful from reaching different conclusions. Nor have we been ordered by the Pope to obey, quote unquote, any particular official version of events. And I would note that the Vatican Secretary of State is a recent, relatively recent creation in the Church. I believe it dates from the 16th century. Would that be correct? Thereabouts. It's not part of the apostolic constitution of the Church. The Secretary of State is essentially a diplomat and a manager of Vatican affairs who does not have any direct pastoral authority over the faithful. He's not a super bishop that presides over all the bishops in the world. Only the Pope has that status. And so I don't see at all any question of obedience, nor did Antonio Socci when he wrote his book, lodging accusations which I have to say are every bit as serious as the ones that I've aired here today. Thank you.
I agree that there's no obligation of obedience, but there was implied by Mr. De Carli today when he said, of course I'm devoted to Our Lady of Fatima, but I'm also Catholic. Somehow or other implying that you're not Catholic if you disagree with the Cardinal Secretary of State, or with even if you disagree with the statements of a Pope. What is binding on a Pope, and the Protestants have the idea we will protest and we will leave the Church. But what the great theologians in the Church have said, such as St. Thomas, such as St. Robert Bellarmine, such as Torquemada, all of them pointed out that if the Pope were to give an order, says Torquemada, which would be destructive of the good of the Church, you must not only not obey, but you must resist. St. Robert Bellarmine points out the same thing, but says that you cannot depose the Pope. You cannot judge him. You can't take an act of jurisdiction that is not yours. But we can stand for the truth. And you can not carry an order which is not right. St. Thomas defines law with 4 conditions. Law is the ordination of reason. If a law were made that's not reasonable, it's not law. The second ordinance of St. Thomas for law is it must be for the common good. If an order is given not for the common good, for example, there's a bishop in England in the 12th century, the 13th century, who refused to take the appointment of the Pope's nephew. And the Pope, he always evaded it by saying, well, it wasn't canonically written properly. Then the Pope had the letter written in such a way that there was no escape from the way it was written. And he just said to the Pope, if you can show me how appointing your nephew as canon in my cathedral in Lincoln will help save the souls there in any way, I will obey. The Pope had no answer. He was just for getting the benefit of the money, that's all. So he didn't obey. And he was within his rights. So Just obedience in itself is not blind obedience. Obedience is for the good of the church. Obedience is for something that upholds the good. And if a person has a religious order, I'm not a religious. Now the religious have a superior vow which says, I'll obey whatever I'm told. I'm a diocesan priest. I obey my bishop. I've never been either accused of or found to be disobedient. But never at the same time when they accuse me of something, as he's now Cardinal Grodzielewski said about Father Gruner, when I try to hire a lawyer here to defend me against the accusation that I was being disobedient, the lawyer's name is Franco Ligi, who's also a lawyer for the civil on the Supreme Court of the Italian government, and he was told, he's now Cardinal, he was an Archbishop, what he said was, this is not about Father Gruner's incarnation, it's about what he says. So it's like going in for a parking ticket and being accused of murder. The fact is, they dare not say to me that I'm doing something wrong because I know the law, I know the theology, and they can't tell me to stop speaking about Fatima because it's been approved by the church. And as such, I would be a derelict in duty if I did start speaking about it but they don't even try to say that to me. They have a false case against me, which I've disproven with the help of my lawyer here many years ago, but they will never state. But Grodzielewski said honestly to the lawyer I was going to hire, he says, not about about his incarnation, it has nothing to do with anything, it's about what he says. But in fact, they can't say that to me officially because they know they haven't got a case to say such a thing. Because I have promoted this message for 33 years, and after, what was it, I think it was 2007, whatever year it was. No, it was 2001. After 23 years of this, the Cardinal Hoyos wrote me a letter saying that I was wrong in something. It was 17 pages. I wrote him back 80 pages. He never responded. I justified every statement. I remember meeting a bishop in upstate New York, and I said the Vatican-Moscow Agreement, and he wrote something bad against me. So I went to visit him. He said, "Well, I'm a doctor of theology." I said, "So am I. I've done my studies in Rome." I said, "So, what's your case?" He says to me, "Well, you see, it was our issue 17 across the top of the page said." The church betrayed in our time the Vatican-Moscow Agreement. Did you write that? I said, yes. He said, well, case is closed. What's the closed case? It's a fact. He had nothing further to say. No one can stop the truth from being so. As Pope Leo XIII pointed out, the church has nothing to fear from the truth. The truth being, and Our Lady wants, our Lord himself says to me, through Sister Lucy, make it known to my ministers. How do we do that? By shutting our mouth and stopping our pen. We can't make it known if we don't speak, if we don't publish, if we don't make it known. So I'm obeying God rather than men, as the first Pope said. And as Pope Felix III said, Pope St. Felix said, he who will not confound lies when they can be confounded is equally guilty of the lie. As such, morally speaking, I'm bound to speak, and I would be disobedient to God. Where does obedience come from? Obedience, why do I obey anybody? Of course, why does anybody obey anybody? Because God gives authority. But God doesn't contradict himself in dogma, nor does he contradict himself in orders. When God gives an order, he doesn't give someone else the permission to forbid me from carrying out his order. Jurisdiction is limited. All jurisdiction, even the Pope's jurisdiction on the earth, is limited. God respects that jurisdiction. I respect it too, but at the same time, there's a limitation to it. And that limitation has to be respected by me and by the Pope. And when we have an order, unless the Pope comes out and says, the message of Fatima is false, and I define and clear that, up to now the Church has always upheld that the message of Fatima is true. And as such, we have the right to proclaim it, and we have the obligation, if we are capable of doing it. St. Thomas points out that the obligation of professors of theology, when the faith is being attacked, instead of teaching in their classrooms, should be out in the streets defending the truth of the faith, if that's what is necessary. And we're in such a time now. And the faith and the message of Fatima needs to be defended publicly. And by the way, though, no one's ever given me a command not to. But the implication, and I understood it very clearly, he said, but I'm Catholic. And yes, and so am I. I don't want to say I'm more Catholic than Mr. Riccardi, but I'm no less Catholic than Mr. Riccardi. And as such, by proclaiming the message of Fatima, I am being obedient to God, to the Blessed Virgin, to the Church, to the truth, and what the popes themselves have said, and have endorsed Fatima for the last 70 years or more. So, no, we don't have to obey a prelate who tells us not to speak about Fatima. And they've never dared try to do that with me. They know better. Thank you.
Most ordinary Catholics I know are very sympathetic to the Fatima message. It just seems to be universal, and those who are not are when they're made aware of it. Understanding that the Pope, even if he wishes to consecrate Russia properly, may be surrounded by even misguided or cynical enemies of the Church, how could the faithful of the world, perhaps even as a response to this conference, but how could the faithful of the world act so that it would empower him to be able to act more easily in the direction that Our Lady would like?
I appreciate the question. It's my favorite topic, actually. I do believe, first of all, that the faithful have much more importance and influence on their prelates for good than they all believe or even know about. There's a bishop in Texas, I forget which diocese right now, who told me, but not directly, through other people, that just 300 people in his diocese had contacted him about the consecration of Russia. That was enough to cause him to talk to the Pope about it himself. There was an African bishop where we had a conference here in 1985. He's since died. He was the president of the Bishops' Conference of Nigeria. And he was very impressed with the presentation we put on. It was one day, and we had there was a patriarch, Latin patriarch of Jerusalem, that hosted that, was the chairman of that conference. He was very impressed, but unfortunately he didn't have enough knowledge. So when he was presented with a false magazine, I think it was from the Blue Army, saying the consecration of Russia is done, sitting on the Pope's one of the tables when he went to see the Pope for lunch that day, he decided to keep quiet because he didn't feel confident. So unfortunately, in turn, I've been told by a cardinal and by an archbishop in South America and a cardinal from Africa that you, Father Gruner, not someone else, you personally have to see the Pope. I don't have any access to him. I had an invitation to see John Paul II, and Mr. Torellia, who was a visionary and also a prisoner of conscience for 23 years, had made arrangements, and I went with him to see the Pope. However, he was able to see him, but I was not. I can only do what I can do, so I carry on doing what I do where I'm at, and up to now I haven't had the opportunity. Now maybe God will say to me on Judgment Day, you could have done this and you could have done that. However, I know up to now I've not seen him. I have actually encountered Paul VI before I was ordained, and I have actually given a magazine to John Paul II in a public audience, but that's as far as I've gotten. So what can the faithful do? They can do a lot. First of all, you need to be convinced of the argument yourself, of the subject yourself, because if you're not, you're easily put off. First of all, you have to understand, I believe, that Fatima is under complete attack, although it's very subtle and most people don't recognize it. The attack is, first of all, don't talk about Fatima. For example, when I was in grade 5, about 10 years old, we had someone come in our classroom and talk about the story of Fatima to the children. I've done this myself in the 70s and 80s with permission of the bishops. However, we don't go there today, not because I'm unwilling to, but because the doors are closed. So, first of all, we need to talk about Fatima. It is certainly a pious and a beautiful story, and it's wonderful for children, and I don't deny any of that, nor should we take that away from them. But it's much more than simply a story that helps the children be more devoted to Our Lady. It's a prophetic message meant for every man, woman, and child. And that's not just my opinion. John Paul II said that himself in 1982. He also said, can the mother, who with all the force of the love that she fosters in the Holy Spirit and desires everyone's salvation, can she remain silent when she sees the very basis of her children's salvation in her mind? And the Pope answers his own question, no, she cannot remain silent. But the fact is, she has been silenced, de facto, by not talking about her. By not talking about her in public, not talking about her in the schools, not talking about her. When is the last time anyone heard a sermon on Fatima, or the message of Fatima, even to tell you to pray the rosary? Now, one of you can prove me wrong that you're in that particular parish. But I would contend that 95%, if not 100% of the parishes, week to week, never talk about it from year to year since 1960. Why is that? Because there is a universal blanket of silence. And a bishop, a German bishop whose name escapes me, says, why this pall of silence? Is the article he writes in 1960 about Fatima. It's been stopped everywhere. So I remember having to call in the police because someone was robbing me in open daylight. And this guy was a 6'4", a big man. He says, you ever have this again? He says, just call us in. He says, if this happens, we'll wrestle him to the ground. So when you have a strong man, you bring in a stronger man to resist the wrong. And when somebody gives you wrong reasoning, you pull in somebody who can explain themselves and give right reasoning. Well, what do you do when there's silence? The answer is you broadcast louder as much as you can. When the poor man who was blind could not see, and he heard about this noise, he said, what's happening? He said, well, Jesus of Nazareth is walking by. Jesus of Nazareth, have pity on me. And they said, shut up, don't speak. So he raised his voice louder. And he said, still trying to shut up. And then our Lord said, what do you want of me? That I may see. But he understood, you try and silence me, I'm going to speak louder. The same thing with Fatima. The first thing is, they're silencing it many subtle ways. Speak louder, speak it more often, pass the word on, all over the place. The second thing is when people know about Fatima and then they say, oh, well, you don't have to believe in Fatima. It's a private revelation. Well, no, it's much more than that. It's a public prophetic revelation. You will find it defined, for example, in the Fifth Lateran Council, 1517, that in matters of public prophecy, only the Pope can define it. Okay? You have a public miracle before 70,000 people that everybody who has any interest at all can find out the truth about it, that there's no explanation for it, not just the miracle of the sun, which Peter did a great job describing, but also the cure and the conversion of the people of Portugal. Here is a public fact. It has changed the course of history for Portugal. In two generations, the Portuguese Masons claimed that they would wipe out the faith. And no doubt they would have done a good job. They've done a very good job inside the church since 1960. It's taking about 2 generations. But Our Lady said, in contrast, but in Portugal, the dogma of faith will always be preserved. But the fact is, why is that? Because 1/6 of the Portuguese nation goes to Fatima every year. They know about Fatima, they take it to heart. But it's not reserved for the Portuguese, it's for the whole world. So we need to take it to heart. And we need to think that, look, we have the Masonic ideal before us. You have one world religion. That's because you get rid of dogma. You have they call it ecumenism. You get rid of dogma, and you have everyone belonging. But the public state doesn't take a side. So they say. However, you see already the attack on the Catholic Church. If you start speaking against homosexuality in Canada, you can go to jail for it, because you're not taking care of the right. No, there's no neutrality in public government. You're either for God or you're against God. There's no difference. But the Masons will have us believe today that there is a difference. That you can go along neutrally so long. Yeah, that's until they can control. Then they'll smash us with a clenched fist, just as the communists said they would do. Our Lady says, only I can help you. Either we believe that or we don't. If you don't believe it, we're wasting our time. But if you do believe it, do something about it. Speak about it. But first of all, it's not just by natural means. We have, first of all, the means of grace. And grace comes from God. And Pope Leo XIII points out, all grace comes from God the Father, through the sacred humanity of Christ, through the Blessed Virgin, in that order. And that's before the church. She's the mother and the queen of the church. Grace comes the same hierarchical way. God the Father, God the Son, incarnate, the Blessed Virgin Mary, in that order. She's the mediatrix of all graces, and that is why she says, only I can help you. We will not win this victory without Our Lady leading the army, and without us following her orders. And if people understood that, whether they're priest, bishop, cardinal, layman, teacher, whatever profession they have, they all have the chance of influence. How is it that 70,000 people showed up on October 13th? Because 50 people came in June. Those 50 told their friends, and against the government, against the newspapers, and against the clergy, 5,000 people came in July. Where did they come from? 50 people told their friends. and they told their friends, and that's how it happened. And from July 13th at 5,000, went to 15,000 in August, 30,000 September, and 70,000 October, against the opposition from every level, including the clergy, not because they were bad, but because they were afraid of the persecution of the leaders of the state. So the lay people have all the power, and I think that's part of the message, that the lay people, it's up to you, and it's up to the poor with the faith to spread the word. Because I can tell you that the rich, whether they're rich in chancellery offices or rich in money, and they don't take the faith first, they're going to say, well, we have to compromise to save our position, to save our reputation, say whatever, and they don't put it first, and it's to their own conclusion. We have had the hour of visitation, just like Jerusalem did, and we don't recognize the hour of that visitation. And as a result of that, we're headed for destruction unless we turn around before it's too late. And it's very, very late. I hope that helps.
Thank you. I am called Father Joseph Kamiza from the Archdiocese of Tororo in Uganda. When my Archbishop told me to come to represent him and the Archdiocese, the priest also asked me, what are you going to do? He said, we are going for a very great meeting, the challenge, the Fatima challenge. What does that involve? He said, well, the messages, you know. I said, yeah, you go, understand everything. I hope I will understand everything. And then come back and make sure that you tell us a lot about it, because a lot had been said, but not very much is very clear yet. There is a bit of fright. People are frighting one another. This message has come. This has happened. Our mother has appeared. No danger is in the world. That's what they are saying. So our coming here is a blessing, which, as you have been mentioning, will help many people to come to know what's the truth about it. Now, in your presentation today, Lucia, Jacinta, and Francisco were told not to say, not reveal the secret, isn't it? So I don't know what they were not told to say. Were they not told to say the secret, and they were told to say that there was a secret? Can you clarify that area? I don't know if you get my point. They were told not to say until a certain time, right? But then I think they must have said that they had a secret which they were not supposed to say. And that was the beginning of those secrets going on. Even up to now, people are carrying the secret which they are not saying properly. I hope you get my question.
I'll try. If I don't get it, you tell me.
Okay.
First of all, Our Lady gave the secret in 3 parts on July 13th, 1917. And when they asked her, what did Our Lady say, they said it's a secret. And so in 1941, Sister Lucy wrote her memoirs under order from her bishop, and she wrote down, she said, the secret we were given in 1917 is in 3 parts. The first 2 parts I can tell you, and she wrote it down. And you'll find it in her 3rd memoir, dated August, I think 31st, August certainly 1941. And then she was asked further questions by her bishop, and she was ordered to write her 4th memoir, in which she wrote down the first and second parts again, and then she started to give the 3rd part, because she then said, in the 4th memoir, it adds the words, in Portugal, the dogma of the faith will always be preserved, etc. When Lucy was questioned about the 3rd secret, she says, in a certain way, I've already given to you. The only difference, in the 3rd secret, she said, in the 3rd memoir, she said, I'm giving you only the 1st and 2nd part. After the 4th memoir, she said, I've given you in a way the 4th secret. And so that's those words, in Portugal, the dogma of the faith will always be preserved, etc., clearly implies that the dogma of the faith will not be preserved, at least some other places, which talks about when you have Cardinal Chappie, who was the cardinal theologian, the papal theologian for Pius XII, John XXIII, Paul VI, John Paul I, and John Paul II. When you have the papal theologian saying, before he dies, in the 3rd secret is foretold, among other things, that the great apostasy in the church begins at the top. There you have what was implicit in the first words, made explicit by Cardinal Chappie, who read the secret. So, but why, I think your further question, or a simple, more interior question is, well, if it's supposed to be secret, how are we talking about it? And the answer is, Our Lady herself ordered Lucy to write on the envelope, by express order of Our Lady, this is to be opened in 1960. That was her express order. So why would you have a secret, some people ask, when it was supposed to be revealed later on? And the answer is because we would not understand it earlier. As I tried to explain yesterday, people would, in my age, when I was growing up, in the 50s, for example, would not understand someone saying that it's going to be priests and sisters who are going to deform Catholic education, and you have to protect yourselves against them. Now, if they said that to us in the 50s, we would not understand it. But it's easy to understand today because things have changed so much. The second thing, I think, reason why that it's progressive, the revelation of Fatima, that is, it continues to unfold more and more, is because it's so contrary to many prejudices that all of us have, that it's a complete different perception. And you know, what the secret services, both United American and others, talk about is called perception management. If they can get you to believe something, then they can get you to do something following that. Now, if you get the point of view that the Blessed Virgin wants you to have, then they will take away all those perception management that they spend billions of dollars on. I mean, I'm not taking sides in many of these things simply because I don't want to get into controversy. But there is perception of different people on civil matters entirely done by the propaganda machinery. All I'm saying is, let's have the truth that the Blessed Virgin want to give us. I understand that Cardinal Bertoni and Mr. De Carli don't believe that that other text is authentic, because I can tell you, Cardinal Bertoni, for example, says, can the Blessed Virgin, who is the help of Christians, he has said this, I'm quoting him almost verbatim, I'm not trying to invent it, certainly substantially I'm telling you, can the Blessed Virgin, who is the help of Christians, he is a Salesian father, and certainly the Blessed Virgin is the help of Christians, can the Blessed Virgin, help of Christians, criticize the Vatican? And the answer is, yes, she can. He thinks, by his conception, it's impossible. Because for him, you know, whatever the official of the Vatican says has got to be followed by the obedient Catholic. No, the answer is, our obedience, first of all, is to God. I obey the Pope because God gives an authority. I obey my bishop because God gives an authority. I obey my father because God gives an authority. But I don't obey my father or my Pope or my bishop when he tells me to do something contrary to the law of God. And that's exactly taught by St. Peter, the first Pope, saying we must obey God rather than men. So, but this perception that we have what is called in moral theology, a reflex principle, which says, you know, when in doubt, give the doubt to the authority. I agree. But when you're certain, you can no longer give doubt to the authority. You have to stand by the truth. The truth, as we're told in St. Paul, in the second letter of Thessalonians, when the Antichrist comes, because the faithful lost their love for the truth. The truth is primordial. We can't be loving the truth on charity, but we can't have charity without the truth. We need both together. Charity and peace have kissed. Truth and justice they're all together. We can't have one without the other, but I insist here on the truth because that's what's under attack. But we must do it with charity and with love of our fellow man and love for God, first of all. But does that answer your question? Yeah,
Good afternoon. My name is Juliana Hofbauer. I'm a retired teacher from Toronto. And I actually have two questions, if I could possibly ask them. The first one, has anyone investigated the specific things that disturbed Our Lady of Fatima in 1917 when she said that World War I would end and that another, much more terrible war would follow if people would not convert? Surely such an investigation would uncover some of the original or root causes of our present-day social ills and give all of us an indication of what Our Lady wants each of us to do.
Our Lady in 1917 said, and I agree with what you're saying, but I want to add something that you might have missed, which I think is crucial. Our Lady said, this war will soon end, and if mankind does not amend, another war worse than this will come about. She then spoke about war, famine, persecution of the Church, and persecution of the Holy Father. And she said to prevent these chastisements to prevent this, I will come to ask for the communions of reparation on the first Saturday, and I will come to ask for the consecration of Russia. So I'd like to point out something that, which is very, first of all, the law of grace is much more important. We cannot, first of all, be good without grace. As the Council of Trent, which is surprising to me when I studied the Council of Trent, said we can easier, my way of putting it is, you can easier live normally without breathing than you can be good without grace. Grace is so necessary. So, and all grace comes to us through the Blessed Virgin. So Our Lady says that mankind has to amend. That's right. But of course we can't amend without grace. And Our Lady says to prevent these chastisements, which are because of man's sin, war, famine, persecution of the church, persecution of the Holy Father, to prevent this, I'm going to ask for two things. And it seems that it's like out in left field to say, well, what have these two things got to do with stopping wars and so forth? And she asked for the communion and reparation, which she explained as confession, communion, praying 5 decades of the Rosary, and 15 minutes meditation, doing those 4 things with the intention of making reparation. And the other one is for the Pope to do the Pope and the bishops together to do the consecration, which she explained again in 1929. So if those 2 things were done, we would not have had World War II. We would not have had the Korean War. We would not have had the invasion of Iraq, Iran. We would not have the Twin Towers. You wouldn't have any of that had the consecration of Russia been done. Now, are we saying that, yes, these things are, whoever caused these things, whether it was one or the other or the third, whoever caused them is ultimately caused by sin. Our Lady told Jacinta, war is a punishment for sin. So there are some sins that are more egregious to God than others. And certainly, knowing what those things are, certainly the First World War, I believe some private revelations have said it's blasphemy, and certainly Our Lady of La Salette spoke about the not keeping holy the Sabbath day. And blasphemy, I think, is a second one, and there may be a third. And certainly other revelations and other saints and holy people at that time have spoken in the same light. And certainly the offenses against God, as bad as offenses against man are, the offenses against God are worse. So but to prevent all of this, all we need is one man and 4,000 other men to consecrate Russia. And it's all over. We have peace given to us. Or all you need is 180 men to elect a pope who makes that his program to consecrate Russia. Either way, once you have the consecration of Russia, and all the Pope has to do is to promise the Blessed Virgin that Pope, will promote the 5 First Saturday devotion upon the conversion of Russia. He doesn't have to do anything other than that. Consecrate Russia, publicly and solemnly. It's a prayer of 5 minutes. He says it publicly with the bishops. They can all be in one place. They can be in their own cathedrals. They say it takes, we spent billions, and if not trillions of dollars on wars. We've lost, in the 20th century, we lost, Russia alone, they've killed over 100 million of their own people. And talking about everybody else, we've lost, and with the Holocaust of the unborn, which is really not the right term for it, because it's religious Holocaust, the religious sacrifice, as a Jewish writer points out, the so-called Holocaust of 6 million is not the right term, because it's not a religious event. It is, but the death and the suffering of these 50 million babies every year, we're up to almost 1 billion babies being sacrificed in abortion in the last 20, 30 years. All of this can be prevented and would be prevented as soon as the Pope and the bishops do the consecration. That will bring about the grace from the Blessed Virgin. And our Lord was asked by Lucy, why will not bring about conversion of Russia? Why will not give us peace without this consecration? And our Lord answered, because I want my whole church to recognize that consecration as a triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Thereby, later on, that my church places devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary beside my Sacred Heart. And He's not going to change His plan. We don't deserve what He wants to give us. And St. Augustine tells us there are certain graces God will not give to us except through the intercession and the merits of the saints. We don't deserve it. God won't give it. He will only give it through the merits of the Blessed Virgin, and He won't give it to us without her getting the credit. That's why He's laid down the condition. Consecrate Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, then you'll have conversion Russia, then you'll have world peace. No other way. Your choice. I think the choice is simple, but apparently after 33 years I've not explained it properly. I hope I did today. Thank you.
My second question, While it is sensational to expose the things that Masons, Satanists, and other evil groups are doing, this exercise tends to point the finger at others than ourselves for the responsibility of our present-day demise. Would it not be valuable to discuss the violations we perpetrate that bring upon us the punishment of these non-Catholic groups? For example, Mother Teresa once said, "Abortion leads to war." Would it not be helpful to shift the emphasis of the areas of our concern?
Well, I think there's two things. First of all, I hope that we don't give the impression that it's only other people. I believe, first of all, that by not listening to Our Lady of Fatima, I think that's what is the sin of the world, our Lord said? He said, because they have not believed in me. What is the sin of our century? Not believing in Our Lady of Fatima. So it's because the refusal of belief that have brought down the destruction of Jerusalem. And yes, there was all sorts of different people, of different groups, plotting this way and that way, but eventually it brought about, but all of these people, the Masons, the Communists, the Satanists, all of them are instruments of God. And they may think that they're fighting God, but they're serving God, liking it or not. As Lucy said, many times the Blessed Virgin Mary told me and my cousins, Jacinta and Francesco, that Russia is the instrument of chastisement chosen by heaven to punish the whole world, unless we obtain the conversion of the whole world, unless we can obtain the conversion of that poor nation. The only way to obtain the conversion of that poor nation is the consecration of Russia. And so, there are, I'm sure, good people in Russia, as there are good people in other parts of the world. But nevertheless, for the Third World War, or for the punishment of the whole world, Russia is the instrument of chastisement chosen by heaven. There's only one way around that, and that is the consecration of Russia. And yes, there are people that argue, and maybe with some reason, that it's because we're so bad that people, when Sister Lucy said, you know, why won't you convert Russia without the consecration of Russia? He said, because I want my whole church to recognize that. And therefore, I'm not changing my plan. It's only this way. Then she said, you must convince the Holy Father, because he won't believe me. And he said, our Lord said to Lucy, pray a great deal for the Holy Father. He will do it, but it will be late. So we must pray for the Holy Father. It's part of our obligation. It's not just here, I'm not here pointing a finger, well, it's Cardinal Bertoni and it's Bishop so-and-so. No. We have to, first of all, know what the truth is. We have to have our, you know, when Louis de Montfort wrote his book on the Secret of the Rosary, he gives an example of one of his forefathers who was a knight. He had 700 men, and it was in the Middle Ages, and he came to a walled city, and he entered the city, and shortly after that, 20,000 men came to that city. They were shut out for the night, and St. Louis de Montfort's forefather, whatever he was, he's by the same name, prayed all night, fasted and prayed the rosary before the Blessed Sacrament. But what did he do in the morning? In the morning, he took his 700 men, I think it was 750, he lost 50 of them, he took 750 men, that's all he had, and he didn't go anywhere else. He went after the leader of the enemy on the other side. With 750 men, he defeated 20,000. He lost 51 of his own men. What did he do? Very simple strategy. He went for the head. Where's the head? The head is consecrate Russia. That's what the head is. Consecrate Russia, and the rest, two things happen. Russia is converted, and Russia, who understands from bitter experience of 70 years, understands the real enemy is Masonry. And the Masons will be given their choice. Stop your opposition to the church, or pay the price of it. They will understand that. That is why the consecration I mentioned of David yesterday. David was consecrated, therefore he could convert, he could kill a lion and a bear single-handedly, barehanded. Now, what man would dare do that today? But David did it. He's less than 18 years old. And who would take on this giant of a man, Goliath, by himself with one stone and a slingshot? Yet David did it because he was consecrated. It is the consecration of Russia that will defeat the enemies of the church. God using Russia, this time as an instrument of chastisement of the enemies of God. But because we have listened to the corruption that the Masons put out, as a plan. If you read their plan, the Alta Vendita is, we cannot bring about the defeat of the church by a stiletto. By killing the Pope, to put it in blunt words, it won't bring about the demise of the church. No, we must corrupt the church through their five senses, so they completely become corrupted, so the church will fall by itself. And that is the plan that the Masons have deliberately followed. So when Our Lady said in Fatima that certain fashions will be introduced, she didn't say they would happen, she said they would be introduced. That is, deliberately introduced by the enemies of the church, and the faithful Catholics who are not so faithful are been taken in by this corruption that's been offered to them. When the prophet Balaam was offered gold, he told the people, the enemies of the people of God at that time, said, you want to defeat them? You can't win, because God protects them. But if you want to win, make them sin enough. And when you make them sin enough, then God will withdraw his protection. And that has been the strategy of our enemies, and yes, by name, the Masons. Let us be at least aware of their plans, aware that they're plotting this thing, and they have plotted it, and they've declared it publicly. Let's be aware of it, and let's not go out on a Masonic witch hunt. Let's rather go out and recognize that these are our enemies. We should pray for their conversion, as St. Maximilian Kolbe did, and got others to pray for their conversion. At the same time, recognize their tactics. And it's important we recognize their tactics. It's not to draw upon, oh, well, it's them that's the fault, not me. I'm holy. I'm the best guy there is. No, let's understand their tactics, and let's be on our guard against attack on a personal basis, but also on a social basis. That's why we talk about this stuff. Not just to say we're good and holy and these guys are bad. That's not the purpose of it. Okay.
First, Father Gruner, let me say that I'm confident that I speak for everyone in this room when I say thank you from the bottom of my heart for your passion, your fight, your apostolate, because it is through your relentlessness that the message of Fatima will get out. So thank you, first and foremost. I only have one brief question, and then I'm sure you want to get out and enjoy your birthday, so buon compleanno. Yesterday you mentioned that you believed that Pope Benedict XVI was the Pope, or the Cardinal in white, the Bishop in white rather, that the apparition of Fatima speaks of. And my question is, what makes you believe that Pope Benedict XVI will suffer this death? Why now? Why does the third secret deal with our time? What signs do we have that it's upon us right now?
Well, you can read much, to bring about, first of all, the larger context of the question. The third secret refers to our time. I think there's no doubt about that. But just to defend it, Sister Lucy, I'll give you 4 things. And this all comes from Frere Michel in his 3rd volume of his 2,000-page works. We have it there. You're welcome to a copy of it. But I'll try and summarize it. There are 4 points we know it concerns our time. First of all, the third secret is part of the whole secret. So the third secret comes in order. She talks about, in the second part of the secret, talks about the Second World War, the Great Sign of 1938, and the Second World War would come about because of the sins of men. It could have been prevented by the consecration, but it wasn't obviously done. And then in 1960, she wants the secret released by 1960, and now we have it, thanks to Cardinal Bertone, we have the handwritten order, Lucy's own words saying, Our Lady, by express order, wanted it released in 1960. So, why? And then Lucy was asked one time, why 1960? And she said, because it will be clearer then. I think she told that to Cardinal Ottaviani. So here you have, it's a prophecy. We have Cardinal Ottaviani telling us a prophecy. Therefore, it's foretelling the future. It's foretelling the future that becomes clearer in 1960. What becomes clear in the prophecy? Well, the prophecy starts to become realized. It's started in 1960 or shortly before 1960. So the next thing we know about it is, at the end of the secret, we have the famous words of Our Lady, but in the end, my Immaculate will triumph. The Holy Father will consecrate Russia to me, Russia will be converted, and a period of peace given to mankind. So here we are in 1960, and the period, we haven't got the consecration yet, and where are we? We're in that period. So we're in the time of the third secret. It applies to us now. So now, to come to your more specific question, which is, why do I think the third secret, that is more exactly the vision of the Pope dressed in white, who was executed, as was released by the Vatican in 2000, who was executed or shot, as it describes him, by a band of soldiers. I point out that in the message of in Rianjo, 1931, to Sister Lucy, she asks, our Lord says, make it known to my ministers. So just remember, in 1929, our Lord came with the Blessed Virgin and in the Holy Trinity, and Our Lady speaks, in which Our Lady says, the moment has come in which God asks the Holy Father to make and to command all the bishops of the world to make. And there's two versions of that. I'm quoting the second one. It's on page 555 of the second volume of Frere Michel. It's a document in Lucy's own handwriting, and the word is command. The one that we have, which is more commonly known, is actually rewritten by her Jesuit confessor. The first one got destroyed, but the second one has the word, the Pope has to command the bishops. And I gave an reason why that is. But let's just get to the... So, in 1929, Sister Lucy is told, very formally, in the formal apparition for the consecration of Russia. 2 years later and 2 months later, our Lord comes to Sister Lucy. She was praying in the chapel in Rianjo in Spain, and she was in Our Lady of Guadalupe shrine. Actually, not Guadalupe from Mexico, but Guadalupe from Spain. So it was a replica of that. And there our Lord says, she was praying for the conversion of Russia, Spain, Portugal. Our Lord congratulates her for praying. I very much, I like the fact that I forget how he puts it. He says, you please me, that's how he phrased it, you please me very much by praying for the conversion of those four nations. Ask it also of my mother. He then dictates two prayers for Lucy to say. He says, pray often, sweet heart of Mary, be the salvation of Russia, Spain, Portugal, Europe, and the whole world. Sweet heart of Mary, be the salvation of Russia, Spain, Portugal, Europe, and the whole world. So first of all, to those who say we're picking on Russia, the message of Fatima understands it's not just Russia that needs conversion. The whole world needs conversion, and particularly Spain, Portugal, and Europe. Not to take part against the rest of the world. The whole world needs conversion. So one thing. Second thing is, he says, at other times pray, by thy pure and immaculate conception, O Mary, obtain for me the conversion of Portugal, of Russia, Spain, Portugal, Europe, and the whole world. So, first of all, there, but it says, then he says, make it known to my ministers, given they follow the example of the King of France. They will follow, in delaying the execution of my command, like him, like the King of France, they will follow him into misfortune. Well, what is the misfortune of the King of France, and what did he do? The King of France was told by the Sacred Heart to consecrate France to the Sacred Heart, by putting the Sacred Heart on the flags of France, to consecrate his court to the Sacred Heart and so forth. And the kings of France for 100 years did not obey. So, asking me about timing, 2017, we have now 93 years passed by. We have 7 years to go to 2017. Now, it's not said that we have, but in St. Alphonsus writes in his theology, he says that everything with God is measured. God, before you're born, has an allotment of how many mortal sins you're allowed to commit. After that allotment is reached, that's it. Some people have zero allotment. So, and no one knows what the allotment is. Everything is measured by eyedropper with God, including the amount of time that he gives for obeying a command. And it's clearly seen to the day that the King of France was given the order, from the time St. Margaret Mary received it to the time he was stripped of the power to be able to carry it out, was 100 years to the day. 17th of June, 1689, 17th of June, 1789. And by the way, the feast of St. Gregory Barbergio is the 17th of June, the same relic that John 23rd put the secret in is St. Gregory Barbergio's thing, 17th of June. Is that a coincidence? You can call it that. Is that something that God is trying to tell us something? 17th of June, 100 years to the day, maybe we got 100 years to the day. He's trying to tell us something. Given they follow the example of the King of France, in delaying the execution of my command, like him, they will be executed. Now you have the vision given to us in 2000, read by Cardinal Ratzinger and Archbishop Bertoni. I believe that Archbishop, I think it's also significant that Cardinal Ratzinger is actually reading, which I believe to be his own death notice, because he is the bishop in white. Now, why would I say that? Well, first of all, we're running out of time. We have 7 years to go. And yes, it's possible that Pope Ratzinger will die before 2017. And that's one possibility. The second thing is that there are people who have prophetic gifts, who I've seen proving themselves, and he tells me that this Pope will not do the consecration of Russia. Now, then it's a mathematical deduction. If it won't be this Pope doing the consecration of Russia, but I believe that this Pope will release the whole secret finally. It will be this Pope that has to die in that vision. Not that I'm imposing it on, but that's just the force of the prophecy. Is conditional for delaying it. The next Pope will get the message and do the consecration. So that's where I deduced it from. I don't know if that's clear enough, but I hope that is.
I belong to the congregation of the Montfort Missionaries, and that the charism is to establish the kingdom of God through the queenship of Mary. And that Montfort said, we go to Jesus, we go to God through Mary. But if a Christian finds it difficult to go to Mary to go to God through Mary, he or she can go straight away. But Montfort said he would question the faith of that person. Now, my question is, Mary appeared in 1917 in Fatima, and after that, Mary seems to appear in different places. For example, Medjugorje started since 1981, giving messages up to now. I don't know whether this group made some research. I mean, to go to Medjugorje. Of course, the church has not yet approved these apparitions. Whether the messages given by Mary to those the people in Medjugorje would be the same as these messages we get from Fatima. Thank you.
It's precisely because the church has not approved the apparitions of Medjugorje that I don't address them. There is also apparitions in many other places. In fact, according to some official of the Holy Office, Our Lady has appeared every day of the year since 1830 to the present time. She certainly, she has a great love, and a love that we cannot fully comprehend because it's so great. But she has a love for us, and she sees us in danger, and it makes a lot of sense that she would be appearing in many places and telling people what they must do. And certainly on a personal basis, and I think that the message of Fatima, for example, gives us, the consequences on a personal basis. If we live according to God's law, the children had the foretaste of heaven, and they accepted to be sacrificed themselves for the conversion of sinners and for Our Lady's wishes. On the other hand, if we don't, or they show them the vision of hell of July 13th, in which we see people who weren't reflecting, who weren't doing enough, who fell into hell. And so on a personal basis, I'm sure her message is always the same, that is to keep God's commandments, receive the sacraments, pray. As St. Alphonsus tells us, he who prays will be saved, he who does not pray will be lost. That is, if we don't pray, we won't get the graces we need. If we don't get the graces we need, we won't be good. We will fall into sin. So we must pray, we must receive the sacraments worthily, and we must keep God's law. We must keep the faith. As St. Athanasius tells us that, quicumque vult salvus esse, whoever wishes to be saved before all good works must first of all hold on to the faith whole and entire. That's in the Athanasian Creed. And so when Pope John Paul II is telling us that can the Blessed Virgin, when she sees us in danger, can she remain silent, when she sees the very basis of her children's salvation in her mind, and he answers his own question, no, she cannot remain silent. But what is the basis he's talking about? Well, the first basis she's talking about is the faith. So when Our Lady at Fatima talks about the dogma of the faith always being preserved in Portugal, implying clearly that it won't be preserved elsewhere, the first thing you must be on your guard for, and St. Athanasius tells us, is to hold on to the Catholic faith, whole and entire. So now that's why there are other apparitions. There are people who accuse Medjugorje, for example, of preaching heresy, in which case then they should avoid Medjugorje. Now, I am not an expert on this subject, but I've read writers on both sides, and when they tell us that the apparition at Medjugorje tells us that it doesn't matter what religion you belong to, then that cannot be Catholic. And as such, maybe that's a false reporting of what was said there. Maybe, in another occasion, I'm told that the devil appeared and then transformed himself into the Blessed Virgin, and the Blessed Virgin, the same person, apologized for the devil's presence. But that's a clear sign that that apparition was not of God. However, the dogmatic theology is more certain, which is, if the devil tells you something contrary to the faith, you don't need the church to intervene. You already know it's not of God. Now, there may be I have a very very orthodox theologian in the mid-'80s telling me that there are people that were taking too much influence, that they were good sources at the beginning. I just know that with Fatima I have more than enough work, and I've stayed purposely away from any unapproved apparitions so that I don't get, first of all, misrepresenting, oh, you got that from this place, you got, no. Everything I'm saying comes from Fatima, as far as I mean, or my Catholic theological training. It doesn't come from, or facts that you can verify for yourself as far as you can believe the newspapers or history books. That's what I've stayed with. So, but at the same time, Our Lady certainly has a great love for us, and she wants us, and certainly there are certainly other apparitions. I know Our Lady approved at Bano and Borang. She's also appeared, of course, at Lourdes, but nothing has the comparison, in my understanding. I love some other Marian sanctuaries besides Fatima, maybe even more, for their beauty and their devotion. But the message of Fatima, there's nothing that compares to it, because, first of all, only there does she promise world peace, when we obey her commands given at Fatima. Only there does she is the miracle of the sun before 70,000 people for our time. Only there do we have a message which every other message, for example, there's an apparition in the Ukraine, for example, in which talks about, without mentioning Fatima, talks about the conversion of Russia in some future time, which points to the consecration. But I think the same thing, Garabandal talks about that. Now, I've had a bishop from Hiroshima telling me he believes in it, but it's not been approved. You've got Garabandal talking about an event taking place in which the great miracle will take place, and sometime which coincides with a thing that has never taken place in the lifetime of Conchita, for example. I think that'll be the consecration of Russia. All roads on these messages lead back to Fatima, and without Fatima, if we despise or push it aside, I think we don't have the solution without Fatima, and that's why I go that way.
Father Gruner, I don't have a question. I just want to tell you because you said it in the beginning, how important it is for all of us to have the real faith, and if we don't have the real faith, it doesn't. And where are we going? So just a little story that happened less than a year ago. My husband is a doctor in France, Paris, and a lady came into his office with a little boy of 10 years old who had cancer in his head. And my husband asked him to do 1,000 exams. And the lady came back, and my husband looked at her, and he said, "I'm sorry, there's nothing that we can do." He was already blind in one eye because the cancer was right here. And my husband looked at her and said, "Do you have faith?" And she said, "Yes, I do. Take your boy to Fatima." She looked at him and frowned. And she said, "To Fatima?" "Yes, take your boy to Fatima." And she did, 10-year-old boy. And she explained to the boy where they were going and what was all that about. And the little boy, as he arrived there in the church and everything, he kneeled and put his head on the floor. But nobody told him to do this. He did it all by himself. Well, to make a long story short, the boy is completely cured. Months later, he came back. The mother comes back to my husband's office and said, "I think there's something going on because I think he's better." And all the doctors, they had to. And so my husband had it published in a medical journal, that's because he thought it was very important to talk about this miracle. And so this is what I want to say, that even being a doctor, whatever you are, you must have faith, and you must put this out if you do believe. So I'm just...
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Eileen Lee, and I'm from Mississauga, Ontario, Canada. My question is, we've got a lot of information about what the secret is possibly about. We know that the Pope, the current Pope, has got that information. He's read the document. One of the things that you mentioned, Father Gruner, was the fact that the Pope needs to instruct the cardinals and the bishops to join him in the consecration. Now, what's to prevent him from doing that, even though the expectation might be that maybe not all of the archbishops, not all of the cardinals will join him, but the point is, if we go back to something that Edwin Faust said this morning, he mentioned the fact that Abraham was praying for Sodom and Gomorrah, and the fact that God was prepared to reduce the number of people who were praying and being supportive of what he was expecting of the people at that time. Now, the same is expected of us at this time. What if the Pope, does the consecration and only 3/4 of the cardinals and the archbishops join him? I don't know if you can address that, but I think that's, it's something that we need to look at.
I think that, first of all, I think the vast majority of bishops will obey, because I write to the bishops. I try to write every month. Maybe some of them get tired of me, but I do write to them, and they do reply back to me as well. And I've had over 2,000 bishops. There are 4,700 more or less bishops. About 110 bishops die every year, and so I keep in touch with them. We've had as many as 1,500 at one time endorsing our position in private, but apparently they're not the most powerful bishops. However, even the bishops who oppose me, they're very weak when it comes to saying they will disobey when it comes to consecration of Russia. But there is a very simple answer. It must be the Pope and all the bishops. So how can you get even, say, 5% to obey? And I think that actually there's less than 10 that are strongly against it, who have the courage or the conviction to actually write such a thing in a letter. Now, maybe they say, we don't have to pay attention to Father Gruner, we won't bother telling him. But there is opposition, but it's nothing like the Secretary of State portrays to the Pope. And it's not just one Secretary of State, but it's the last two of them. And I don't know, I've not heard stories about Cardinal Bertone, whether he opposes it or not, other than he himself says, we should not talk about this anymore. You see, people don't understand that there's a whole policy. It's not just the Secretary of State, but there's a whole policy since the Second Vatican Council, which they shouldn't see this as a problem, but they do anyway. But the fact is, all the Pope has to do is give an order upon which the bishops have to lose their office if they don't obey. He can give such an order, and it's defined in the First Vatican Council that the Pope can order all the bishops. He can order all of us for sufficient reason. Now, if anyone wants to think that there's not sufficient reason here, I suppose they can choose not to obey. But if they lose their office by not obeying, then we don't need their obedience. And I would say the vast majority of bishops would obey. So it's not very hard. Now, Lucy answers the question, what about those bishops who are in prison? And there are certainly some of our holiest bishops are actually in prison in China, for example, and have been there for years. They aren't expected to obey because God is not asking the impossible. So if they're constrained by prison or by sickness, if they just simply can't stand on their feet because they're too ill, then God is not expecting that of them. And of course, their non-conformity is not an act of disobedience. It's simply that conditions imposed upon them either by their enemies or by their health. So we would get 100% obedience when the Pope gives the order properly. And it's not that hard for him to do that. I'm speaking now theologically. Now, the second question comes down to, I do have 100 people who work for me, and I understand it's easier to rule by consent than by dictatorship. So I understand, but it shouldn't be that hard to explain the matter. Most people, when they hear what it's all about, any opposition they have, drop it. if he's anticipating opposition, let me go to them. I've yet to find a bishop or anyone I can't answer a question to. I still remember the experience I had when I was in India, and the bishop asked a very intelligent question, and I was saying to myself as he was asking it, I see where he's going with this. I wonder what I'm going to say to him when he answers, because I don't have the answer. As soon as he finished speaking, I had the answer just like that, which reminded me of what I did when I was in theology, when I would oppose, dare I say, heretical professors, and I got so angry with one, I didn't raise my voice, but I actually had to raise my voice to get his attention. I said, what discrimination? He was talking against St. Paul. In the scriptures, St. Paul was discriminating against women. I said, he said this every day for a week, and it kept on going. I finally said, against my better judgment, I said, what discrimination? And for the next 20 minutes, he tried to tell me I was wrong in front of the whole class. After 20 minutes, he had nothing left further to say. Now, I didn't know what I was going to say next, but I was praying Hail Marys all the time, and when he was finished, I answered him. And by the time we were finished, he never brought it up again once except say, he brought it for 10 seconds and then dropped it. That was it. The answers will come. And I've yet to say, it doesn't have to be me. It could be anybody. Our Lady can use anybody. But if you've got nobody else to explain it to them, I can explain it to them. At least up to now, Providence has provided that way. So I don't think there'll be any opposition, really. And whatever opposition there is, to be so small, it wouldn't matter. The Blessed Virgin gave us a message how to have world peace, that only she can help us. But perhaps we don't get enough perspective. We say, well, nothing dramatic has happened. And it's because our commentators, our newspapers, our editor writers, the people that we really pay attention to, the people that speak on television, in the mainstream press and so forth, people who are under the pay of the enemy often, have yet to point out to us that since we have despised Our Lady's message as the human family, we've despised it, there have been 1,686,570,000 violent deaths as a direct result of ignoring Our Lady of Fatima. That is, again, 1 billion. That is 1 with 9 zeros after it, plus another 686 million people who have died violently for the one simple reason that we've ignored Our Lady of Fatima. We could point out, perhaps another time, that if this is not enough perspective to give us that in these 95 years of ignoring Our Lady of Fatima, we have paid a tremendous price. But as bad as that is, that price will be doubled or tripled in the next couple of years if we ignore her much longer. Just a few months ago, the world's population passed 7 billion people. 7 billion people. Scripture tells us, and other prophecies tell us, that 1/3 to 2/3 of the entire population of mankind will be wiped out in this war to come. I don't know what it takes to wake us up. Maybe we have to find it on NBC or CBS or some commentator in the New York Times before we finally take this seriously. And maybe we say to ourselves, we take it seriously, but I think we don't take it seriously enough. We have many priorities. Sometimes I wonder how I get through my day between what I'm supposed to do today, between getting up and doing my reading, doing my other work, talking to people that God wants me to talk to and so forth. And we only all have 24 hours a day. And I'm sure that my life is not as busy as the bishops and the Pope. But we must make this priority number one. There is nothing more serious, nothing more important, nothing more urgent than Our Lady's message at Fatima. And this is something that I don't know how to say. I remember getting a letter from an older bishop many years ago. I think he was in Ottawa. And he said to me basically in his letter, Father Gruner, if you would not raise your voice so much, if you would not yell at us, we might start paying attention to you. And I wrote back to him and I said, I appreciate very much your interest and your concern and your advice. Now, if you can tell me how I can do that any better than what I'm doing and get the attention, I'd be very happy to do it. I hate yelling at people. I hate raising my voice, and I hate trying to draw attention to myself. But there's no other way around on this message. If there's something more important, and certainly yesterday we were in this March for Life here in Rome, and the number of people that are killed by abortion since about 1975, by the statistics we looked up, is about 1,300,000 people. And by war, there's another 78 million people. And then by government murder, not only in Russia and China, but other parts of the world, 238 million people. These are catastrophic, and they lead us to think that we are, as Pope Pius XII, rather Pius X, St. Pius X said, that we are in the days just before the coming of the Antichrist. These things that are happening to us, which Pope Benedict, when he was Cardinal Ratzinger, said, that refer to this Fatima message is found in sacred scripture, that we are living the times of the apocalypse. And although we can be distracted with everything from daily newspapers to new movies or whatever else it is that entertains us, these things are happening around us, and they're happening every day. And they're happening in such a way that how can we deny that we're living in, if it's not the apocalypse, if it is not the time coming before the Antichrist, it is the best, shall we say, preview or event which the world has never seen before.
I have come to warn the faithful to amend their lives and ask pardon for their sins. They must not continue to offend our Lord, who is already deeply offended. In the final vision on October 13, 1917, Our Lady silently held out the scapular, a gesture which indicates that she wants everyone to wear it. Our Lady said, "If my requests are not heeded, Russia will spread her errors throughout the world, raising up wars and persecutions against the Church. The good will be martyred. The Holy Father will have much to suffer, and various nations will be annihilated."
The Blessed Virgin gave us a message how to have world peace, that only she can help us. But perhaps we don't get enough perspective. We say, well, nothing dramatic has happened. And it's because our commentators, our newspapers, our editor writers, the people that we really pay attention to, the people that speak on television, in the mainstream press and so forth, people who are under the pay of the enemy often, have yet to point out to us that since we have despised Our Lady's message as the human family, we've despised it, there have been 1,686,570,000 violent deaths as a direct result of ignoring Our Lady of Fatima. That is, again, 1 billion. That is 1 with 9 zeros after it, plus another 686 million people who have died violently for the one simple reason that we've ignored Our Lady of Fatima. We could point out, perhaps another time, that if this is not enough perspective to give us that in these 95 years of ignoring Our Lady of Fatima, we have paid a tremendous price. But as bad as that is, that price will be doubled or tripled in the next couple of years if we ignore her much longer. Just a few months ago, the world's population passed 7 billion people. 7 billion people. Scripture tells us, and other prophecies tell us, that 1/3 to 2/3 of the entire population of mankind will be wiped out in this war to come. I don't know what it takes to wake us up. Maybe we have to find it on NBC or CBS or some commentator in the New York Times before we finally take this seriously. And maybe we say to ourselves, we take it seriously, but I think we don't take it seriously enough. We have many priorities. Sometimes I wonder how I get through my day between what I'm supposed to do today, between getting up and doing my reading, doing my other work, talking to people that God wants me to talk to and so forth. And we only all have 24 hours a day. And I'm sure that my life is not as busy as the bishops and the Pope. But we must make this priority number one. There is nothing more serious, nothing more important, nothing more urgent than Our Lady's message at Fatima. And this is something that I don't know how to say. I remember getting a letter from an older bishop many years ago. I think he was in Ottawa. And he said to me basically in his letter, Father Gruner, if you would not raise your voice so much, if you would not yell at us, we might start paying attention to you. And I wrote back to him and I said, I appreciate very much your interest and your concern and your advice. Now, if you can tell me how I can do that any better than what I'm doing and get the attention, I'd be very happy to do it. I hate yelling at people. I hate raising my voice, and I hate trying to draw attention to myself. But there's no other way around on this message. If there's something more important, and certainly yesterday we were in this March for Life here in Rome, and the number of people that are killed by abortion since about 1975, by the statistics we looked up, is about 1,300,000 people. And by war, there's another 78 million people. And then by government murder, not only in Russia and China, but other parts of the world, 238 million people. These are catastrophic, and they lead us to think that we are, as Pope Pius XII, rather Pius X, St. Pius X said, that we are in the days just before the coming of the Antichrist.